The old painter's name was Aoki. She had painted hundreds of portraits in her lifetime and had gained fame across Europe and America. Unlike others, Yumi wasn't afraid of the old painter. She was actually excited to meet her. "I heard you only take on students. Is it true?" she asked. It was a portrait of Yumi, but there was something strange about it. But she still refused to let Yumi see the finished piece. She had posed for countless hours and had no idea what the end result would be. Determined to uncover the truth, the woman in the painting wasn't just a static image. She was alive, breathing, and moving. But as she continued to explore the studio, she realized that this was no accident. She confronted the old painter about what she had done. She demanded an explanation, but the painter only stared back at her with a blank expression. "I am your curse, and I will never let you go. Finally, I am free," she cried. And with that, Yumi's vision went black. When the police arrived at the studio, they found Yumi's body lying lifeless on the floor. The old painter was nowhere to be found. The only clue to what had happened was a single drop of blood on the canvas, which depicted Yumi's horrified face, frozen in a silent scream. So they decided to play a prank on him and challenge him to spend a night in the haunted house. And he sees the same ghostly woman smiling down at him. He tries to run, but it's too late. The woman grabs him and drags him into the darkness. The camera crew finds the man's body the next morning, and they discover that he had been scratched to death. They also find a note on his chest that reads, "Thank you for coming." The man agrees, and he brings along a camera crew to document the experience. Yumi screamed and tried to flee, but the woman was faster than she was. In a flash, she had grabbed Yumi's arm and sunk her teeth into her flesh. The pain was excruciating, and Yumi could feel her life force draining away as the woman drank her blood. It was as if she wasn't hearing a word Yumi was saying. Suddenly, Yumi noticed something even more disturbing. The portrait had changed. The woman in the painting was no longer looking at her, but was instead gazing off into the distance. Some say that Yumi's spirit is still trapped in the painting, forever tormented by the woman who stole her face. Others believe that the painter is still out there, searching for her next victim to add to her cursed collection. She looks down at him with an eerie smile on her face, and then she disappears. The man is terrified, and he spends the night hiding under his bed. In the morning, he finds a note on his pillow that reads, "I'm here to help you." The man freaks out and runs away. The truth is, no one knows what really happened to Yumi, but the legend of the ghost in the gallery lives on. It was as if she were watching Yumi and waiting for her to leave. A man buys an old house, but soon realizes it's haunted. One night, he hears footsteps above him. He ignores them, thinking it must have been the wind. But the sound continues to get louder, and he begins to feel uneasy. The painter had deliberately created this masterpiece to haunt Yumi. She felt a chill down her spine as she realized the full extent of the painter's obsession. This wasn't just a portrait, it was a curse. Her eyes followed Yumi as she moved around the room, and her lips seemed to form words that Yumi couldn't quite make out. But the most disturbing part of the portrait was the fact that Yumi didn't recognize the woman in it. Sure, the face was undeniably hers, but the way it was painted, it was almost as if it were a different person. With every step Yumi took, the woman in the painting mirrored her movements, as if she were a living, breathing creature trapped on the canvas. Yumi decided to sneak into the painter's studio after she left for the day. Armed with a flashlight, she crept through the dark studio until she came across the canvas. She gasped in surprise at what she saw. Each morning when Yumi arrived at the studio, the painter would turn the canvas away from her, muttering something about needing more time. Finally, Yumi couldn't take it anymore. She demanded to see the painting, but the old painter refused, saying she wasn't finished yet. Yumi argued back, insisting that she deserved to see the portrait she had been posing for. The image of the woman in the painting shifted, and she began to scream in agony. Yumi could hear the pain in her voice, and it echoed through the studio like a death knell. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and Yumi found herself face to face with the woman from the painting. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her expression was filled with rage. But the painter remained unmoved, only deepening the mystery surrounding her intentions. The woman in the painting was eerily similar to Yumi, but she wasn't looking directly at the viewer like a typical portrait subject. Instead, she was gazing off into the distance. As Yumi watched, the painter suddenly reached out and covered the woman's face with a white cloth. Startled by this unexpected gesture, Yumi couldn't help but wonder what the painter was trying to hide. Was she ashamed of her work? Or was there something else going on? The old painter nodded, pleased that someone was interested in learning from her. Yumi was an aspiring actress and said she would do anything to get ahead in her career. Is that so? Then you can start by posing for me, the painter replied. Yumi blushed at the request, but quickly agreed. But now that she was nearing 70, she rarely got any new clients. She was known for being difficult to work with, so most people were afraid to book her. One day, however, she got a call from a young woman named Yumi who wanted a portrait painted. Every morning Yumi would arrive at the studio and pose for hours while the painter observed her, taking notes on everything from her gestures to her facial expressions. For Yumi, this was both exciting and nerve-wracking. Every time she moved or changed poses, the painter would abruptly change the angle of her canvas, always staying just out of Yumi's line of sight. She didn't know what the painter was trying to do, but something about it made her uncomfortable. The painter seemed to be intentionally trying to make her feel uneasy. One day, Yumi arrived at the studio and found the painter staring intently at one of her canvases. Over the next few days, the painter continued to work on the portrait, adding layers of color and detail. As the weeks went by, Yumi became increasingly frustrated by the painter's secrecy. The painting depicted Yumi, but it was unlike any portrait she had ever seen before. At first, Yumi tried to convince herself that it was just a trick of the light or some kind of optical illusion. The next morning when Yumi arrived at the studio, determined to break the curse, Yumi decided to destroy the painting. But as she grabbed a knife and lunged at the canvas, "You can't escape me," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. As Yumi lay dying on the studio floor, she could hear the woman's laughter echoing through the room. The case went unsolved, and the mystery of the painter and her curse remained. Now let's move on to the next story. Then suddenly, he sees the silhouette of a woman standing at the top of the stairs. Years later, he tells his story to a group of friends, but they don't believe him. They think he's making it up for attention. As the night wears on, the man hears the same footsteps on the stairs.